So the cabin horror stories are just one of the videos that I do as a series that I've done recently. In the past, I've done some pretty good ones. Supermarket, fast food, there were tens of them. What other kinds of series of videos do you guys want? Or part 2s or part 3s of popular videos do you guys want? So if you guys have your own suggestions, put in the comments below. Without further ado, grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 3 True Scary Cabin Horror Stories Part 2. Staying in the cabin. Now, this story did not happen to me, but one of my friends who I worked with last summer at the camp that this took place at, and I think it would fit pretty well here. Sometime around 2000 or earlier, my friend had gone camping with his family. He was about 5 years old at this time. They had gone to the summer camp that his family had been involved with for years, and were allowed to use one of their cabins for the weekend because they were on good terms with the full-time staff. Now, the camp is divided into a few clusters of cabins, all of which were pretty old and creepy and built in the early 1930s. They had been pretty well maintained, but never refurbished, with just mesh windows and creaky big wooden doors that could give anyone the creeps, especially with the winter wind blowing. My friend's family was staying in one of the cabins close to the building, where the camp director worked and slept in. On the second day, as it was getting dark, my friend and his older brother, who was a regular consoler there for the past few years, went for a walk, which led them down to a winding dirt road to another cluster of cabins. They could both tell that there was something wrong, but they couldn't place what it was. My friend several years later told me that it felt like everything looked completely ordinary, but it was like there was just something that completely threw the vibe off. His brother would attribute it to what he noticed next. The furthest cabin from the entrance had all of the windows closed. There were large wooden panels that had to be lifted up and put into the mesh windows. Then he heard a loud thud, and then the lights in the cabin were on. Now, it was not uncommon for other cabins to be rented out by hunters in the winter, so he left it alone, even though he still had a strange vibe, and decided not to investigate further. The next morning during breakfast, he was speaking to the camp director and casually asked him how many other cabins he was planning on renting that hunting season, and mentioned that he had noticed that another cabin was being used, back towards the far side of the camp. The director had a stunned look on his face, and then told him to call the police, and that they were not renting out any of the other cabins that weekend. Eventually, the police showed up, and after a 2-hour standoff in the middle of the woods, ended with a man in custody. The story was, for the past 3 weeks, there had been a dangerous man hiding out in a summer camp. My friend didn't know it at the time, but was later told by his brother that when they took him out, he was starving and unshaved. He had a rifle, a pistol, and a shotgun, and 2 duffel bags full of valuables that had been taken during violent break-ins over the past month in the surrounding counties. So yeah, desperate violent robber hiding out in a cabin in the woods. Let's never meet. Living in a cabin in the woods. First post: I'm awful at writing things down, so I do apologize. This happened about 2 years ago. I had just moved about an hour and a half away from home. The first time I had lived away from home. I was working on a kids' activity camp. All the staff lived in 2 massive cabins in the woods. There was about 40 people in each, 2 or 3 to a room. So you can't imagine how big this cabin was. Anyways, everybody became really close. Some people knew each other from previous years working at this particular camp. None of us really locked our doors because we all knew each other and everybody hung out in different friends' rooms all the time. On this camp, my job was working with the kids during the day and doing evening shifts on the bar, which was there for the staff and the teachers and parents that had come with the children. One night, my roommate and I were both working an evening shift on the bar. She was finishing a couple of hours earlier as she was on a different shift. My roommate Debs decided that she was just going back to the room to read and wait for me to finish so we could watch a movie together. She had been gone for about 5 minutes. I mean, that's how long it takes to get from the bar to the cabin when my phone started ringing with her caller ID. I picked up the call, as the bar was pretty dead that night, and the only people in there were the staff. When I picked up the phone call, nobody was saying anything on the other end. I put this down to her just butt dialing me by accident, and hung up the phone. About a minute later, I get another phone call from a friend that lived across the hallway from us. She told me that I needed to come back to the room right now. So I asked the guy I was working with to cover me while I popped back to the room quickly, just to see what was going on. I walked down the hallway, and there was about 5 people just standing outside of my room. I walk inside, and Debs is just standing there crying, which isn't like her at all. All of our stuff was all over our room. Please note that this is very, very weird because I'm pretty sure I have OCD and often tidied my side and her side of the room, even if she didn't want me to. She went on to tell me that her phone had gone missing. I then asked her about phoning me before I came back to the room, and she said that she had no idea what I was talking about. This means someone had taken her phone and knew who to call straight away. Also, when she left work, there would be no point in stealing her phone as it was literally worthless. £10 mobile at the most. A few hours later, we started noticing that things had gone missing, but not normal things people would steal anyways. They could have taken laptops, Kindles, a PlayStation and games or anything like that. Instead, all they took was my bra and knickers, some clean and some from the dirty washing. This made me feel sick, especially because we knew everyone that was living or working there with. For a few days, I kept getting these strange phone calls from Deb's phone, with just silence on the other end. We obviously went and reported it, and our boss had said that they would look into it to see what was going on. Though we kinda got blamed for leaving our door unlocked, which I understand now as being really, really stupid. The creepy thing was, a few days later, I was walking into the staff lounge, and Deb's phone was just placed on the windowsill. Nobody was in there, and nobody seemed to be around. Well, at that point, I noped the fuck out of there as fast as I could, and locked myself in my room until Debs came back. Nothing did ever come out of this, and even to this day, we never found out who it was. But I definitely have a feeling it was someone that knew us quite well, and who knew when we would be out of our rooms. For the life of me, I still don't know who stole my underwear, my roommate's phone, and who trashed our room like that. But I have definitely learned a lesson, and that's not to leave my door unlocked, because there are some gross creepers out there. Cabin in the woods. Hi. So while I've been reading these stories for a while, I have very little experience posting. Hopefully this is in the right place. A couple years ago, my friend Kate had asked me to go with her to a party. This party was being thrown by her friend Susan. Kate had gone to Catholic school with her in elementary and middle school. But during high school, Kate ended up going to public school where she met me, while Susan went to a Catholic high school. The two had grown somewhat apart and hung out with different people, which is why Kate invited me along. It was Susan's birthday after all, and apparently, Susan's parents had decided to rent out a cabin for her. They did this for her the previous year, and unbeknownst to them, she had decided to throw a party. The party had been a hit, so she was planning on doing it again. This time, Kate and I drove to the cabin together. The cabin itself was pretty isolated. Aside from the woods behind it, there wasn't anything around. We couldn't even see other cabins around, but I imagine they would probably be empty because it was in the middle of winter time. I was a little apprehensive with going because I wasn't going to know anyone at this party, but I figured after a few drinks that wouldn't really bother me anymore. Also, if you watch scary movies, you know that having a party in a cabin in the woods is a horror movie cliché. I mean, I was very aware of that. Kate and I had even been joking around about how attending this party sounded like it was a prelude to a horror film, as if that wasn't enough. This was a Catholic school girl party. Eventually, we arrived at the cabin, and it's pitch black outside. We needed to use our phones just to find our way. We go inside. Everything seems fine. Birthday girl is having a fun time. There's a good amount of people around. The odd thing is that there seems to be a strange sort of divide at this party. At this moment, Kate and I were completely unaware of what was happening. I did happen to notice this classy guy who had the name of the city we lived in tattooed in a messy scrawl around his neck. Kate and I had been silently laughing about it, but we were also a little worried because we wondered if that meant he was in a gang or something like that. Anyways, I don't remember why, but the main group of the party wanted these people to leave. I think it had something to do with them drinking a lot, despite not having brought any alcohol of their own or something like that. So in order to get these people to go, the main group said that a ranger or whoever it was coming to stop by, and there were only supposed to be like 2 cars by the cabin and a handful of people. Rumor was that one of the guys in the group was on probation and could not afford to get in trouble. Eventually they left. The plan was a success. Or so we thought. Just as the group leaves, there were maybe about 4 or 5 guys and 1 girl. The girl comes back in and says, "I just want to tell the birthday girl happy birthday," in a really loud voice, drawing everybody's attention. At that moment, everyone was staring at her in confusion. Why was she announcing this? When not even 2 seconds later, we hear a window in one of the back rooms being busted open. This continues on, and more windows are being broken. People are shouting and screaming. I'm just sitting there in confusion. Kate and I had been at this party for all of 15 minutes before all hell broke loose. And the girl who had invited the group of hoodlums is now saying that she knows at least one of them has a gun. Great. At this moment, I don't know if my mind wasn't processing all this correctly or what, but I'm just sitting there thinking, well, this is happening. The majority of us remained in the cabin. A couple of people went outside to see if the group was still there outside. And after a little bit of time had passed, people began to leave. There was still some fear that those guys might be out there waiting for us, but a lot of people just wanted to get the fuck out of there. I remember 3 girls who had been planning on staying the night had gathered all their stuff up. Their arms were full. They began heading towards out the door. As soon as all 3 walk out, we hear screaming coming from the woods. And all 3 girls immediately turn around and walk back in. In retrospect, it was kind of funny. One of the girls proceeds to cry. After the crying stopped, luckily, the scream had only been that of a new girl arriving at the party, we found out. She had seen her friend outside and had actually just screamed in excitement just for seeing her friend, which is also kind of funny in my opinion. Eventually, Kate and I had stayed at the cabin for a couple of hours. I mean, we really didn't want to leave, especially with Susan alone, and the majority of the people had left at this point. Aside from us, there were only a couple of other people left in the whole cabin. Thankfully, those were the people who were staying the night, so Kate and I were able to leave at around 2 a.m. At that point, we had all debated about calling the cops, but considering the underage drinking going on, no one really wanted to. Plus, Susan was worried about her parents finding out about the party, and decided that she was just gonna lie about how the windows had been broken. Thankfully, the group of those people, potential gangsters, did not return. In conclusion, while that night had been scary, all I can really focus on still was the fact that this took place at a cabin in the middle of the woods, at a party thrown by Catholic schoolgirls. Of course, that would be the one and only party I've been to have crazy, scary shit like this happen. But where cliches